The morning sun poured through the tall windows of the school hallway, casting long shadows on the floor. Students moved in clusters, some chatting, some rushing to get to their next class, while the echo of footsteps and lockers slamming filled the air. Among the crowd, a girl in a wheelchair made her way slowly down the hall. She had learned to maneuver with care, her hands gripping the wheels with practiced strength. Her backpack sat neatly behind her, and there was a small smile on her face as she waved to a friend passing by. Despite her usual composure, she could feel the weight of stares from some students. Some looked away quickly, others whispered, and a few snickered. She had grown used to these reactions over the years. School could be a tough place, especially when you were different. She had learned to focus on her own rhythm, pushing forward while letting the world around her swirl with its own chaos. Not far behind, a group of students leaned against the lockers, eyes sharp and movements calculated. They were known for causing trouble, always testing the boundaries of what they could get away with. Their eyes followed the girl in the wheelchair, and an almost imperceptible grin spread across their faces. They whispered among themselves, exchanging glances that spoke louder than words. One of them reached out just enough to make the wheel of her chair wobble slightly. The girl felt the subtle shift immediately and gripped her wheels tighter. Her heart raced as she tried to steady herself. She had experienced moments like this before, minor annoyances and small pushes. But something about the way these students looked at her now made her uneasy. There was no hesitation in their movements, no flicker of doubt. This was intentional, and she knew it. As she moved forward, trying to keep her composure, one of the bullies stepped a little closer, blocking her path. The hallway suddenly felt narrower, the crowd pressing in from all sides. A snicker escaped one of the boys, and the tension in the air grew. She tried to maneuver around him, but he shifted, matching her every move. "Where do you think you're going?" he said, his voice loud enough to draw attention. Others in the hallway glanced over, some curious, some uneasy. She didn't answer, focusing on the wheels beneath her hands, feeling the rubber grip the floor and carry her forward. But he wasn't going to let her pass so easily. Without warning, another student in the group pushed from behind. The force was sudden and strong, tipping the wheelchair just enough to make her fall sideways. Her backpack slipped off the handles and landed on the floor with a dull thud. The wheels clattered and she hit the ground with a jolt. Pain shot through her side, and for a moment the world seemed to blur around her. Gasps erupted from students nearby. Some ran closer, their faces filled with concern while others froze, unsure of what to do. The bullies laughed, a harsh, grating sound that echoed off the walls. One of them even took a step closer, pretending to help but clearly enjoying the chaos. She felt a mix of humiliation and anger wash over her. Her hands were scraped from the fall, and her pride stung even more than her body. She struggled to right her wheelchair, her fingers trembling as she gripped the wheels. A friend rushed over, offering a hand, and she finally managed to sit upright again. "Are you okay?" the friend asked, eyes wide with worry. She nodded, brushing off the dirt from her clothes, though the tears in her eyes betrayed her. She didn't want to show weakness, not here, not now. The bullies were still smirking, whispering to each other as if nothing had happened. A teacher finally appeared, drawn by the commotion. Her presence brought a temporary sense of relief, though she could see the fear still lingering in the girl's eyes. The bullies quickly straightened, putting on faces of innocence. They shook their heads, denying any wrongdoing. "It was just an accident," one of them said smoothly. The teacher frowned, but without clear evidence there was little she could do immediately. She helped the girl to steady her wheelchair and checked for injuries. As the girl moved away, her friend by her side, she could feel the lingering stares of the other students. Some looked away in shame, some whispered behind her back, and others, like the bullies, watched with a sense of triumph. The incident left a mark not just on her body but on her spirit. She had been pushed down, both literally and figuratively, and the echoes of laughter haunted her as she made her way to the next class. In the classroom, she sat quietly, trying to focus on the lesson, but her mind kept replaying the moment over and over. Her hands flexed around the wheels of her chair under the desk. She could feel the anger simmering, the embarrassment that no words could erase. She glanced around at her classmates. Some offered sympathetic looks, others avoided her gaze entirely. She wasn't sure which hurt more. Meanwhile, in another part of the school, a black girl observed the incident from a distance. She had seen what had happened and felt a rush of emotions she couldn't ignore. She knew the girl in the wheelchair didn't deserve this, and something inside her sparked, a need to act. to make sure this kind of cruelty didn't go unanswered. She watched the bullies from across the hall, noting their movements, their confidence, and the way they thought they were untouchable. The day moved slowly, each minute stretching as the memory of the fall stayed vivid. The girl in the wheelchair tried to immerse herself in the lessons, in the chatter of her classmates, anything to distract from the shame and hurt. But she couldn't shake the image of the bullies laughing at her, the feeling of being powerless in a place that should have been safe. Lunch came, and the cafeteria buzzed with noise, trays clattering, friends talking, and the smell of food mixing in the air. She sat at her usual spot, a quiet corner where she could watch without being watched too closely. Her friend joined her, offering a comforting presence. They spoke softly, sharing small jokes and trying to shift the attention away from the morning's incident. Yet every so often her gaze drifted toward the bullies, who were already gathered in their usual spot, joking and pointing subtly, as if to remind everyone that they were still in control. The black girl sitting nearby watched silently. She saw the tension, the lingering pain, and the quiet strength it took for the girl in the wheelchair to keep going. She didn't want to act recklessly, but she knew she couldn't just sit there. She observed, planning, waiting for the right moment. The incident had sparked something in her, a determination to intervene, to make sure that the morning's cruelty didn't define the rest of the day. As the lunch bell rang and students began to shuffle toward their next classes, the hallways once again filled with noise and movement. The girl in the wheelchair moved slowly, aware of her surroundings, her hands gripping the wheels tightly. She felt a mix of fear and anger, a combination that left her tense but alert. The day had started badly, but she resolved not to let it get worse. Around the corner, the black girl followed discreetly, keeping a watchful eye on the bullies. She wasn't sure what she would do yet, but she knew she would act if she had the chance. There was a sense of anticipation, a quiet tension that built with each passing minute. The memory of the girl being knocked over played in her mind, fueling her determination. By the time classes ended for the day, both girls carried the weight of the morning incident with them. One carried it in her body and pride, the other in her mind and resolve. The school day had started with chaos and humiliation, but it had also sparked courage and attention in unexpected ways. The air was thick with anticipation, though neither girl yet knew what the next 30 minutes would bring. After the fall, the girl in the wheelchair sat in the classroom trying to calm herself. Her hands trembled slightly, not from weakness but from the anger and frustration boiling inside her. She tried to focus on the teacher's words, but the echo of the morning's laughter haunted her thoughts. Every glance, every whisper from classmates seemed magnified. She could feel the weight of judgment and the unfairness of the world pressing down on her. Her friend sat beside her, offering quiet support. They exchanged small nods, a kind of silent communication that said, "I'm here with you." It helped a little, but the humiliation from the hallway had already left a mark that words couldn't erase. The girl in the wheelchair clenched her hands around the wheels beneath her desk, gripping them so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She thought about what had happened, replaying the scene again and again. The laughter, the pushing, the sense of being trapped, it all lingered vividly. Meanwhile, in another part of the school, the black girl who had witnessed the incident sat at her desk, her eyes constantly drifting toward the girl in the wheelchair. She had felt a rush of anger and a deep sense of injustice when she saw what happened. She knew something had to be done, but she was careful, weighing her options. Acting recklessly could make things worse for both of them. Yet sitting quietly felt wrong too. She thought about the bullies, their confidence, and the way they believed no one would stop them. That belief had to end. During the next break, the girl in the wheelchair remained cautious, avoiding the places where the bullies usually gathered. She moved slowly, observing the students around her. Some whispered to each other, their eyes occasionally darting toward her. She felt their pity and unease, but it didn't comfort her. She wanted more than sympathy. She wanted fairness, respect, and for the cruelty to stop. The black girl, keeping her distance, followed discreetly. She studied the bullies from afar, noting their habits and patterns. She saw the way they laughed, how they moved through the hallways, how they targeted anyone they thought could be an easy mark. She made mental notes, thinking through possible ways to intervene without putting herself or the girl in the wheelchair in immediate danger. There was a quiet determination building inside her, a mix of anger and moral responsibility. As classes continued, the girl in the wheelchair tried to immerse herself in the lessons, focusing on the sound of the teacher's voice and the scribbling of notes. But every now and then, she caught a glance from the bullies in the hallway or overheard a whisper from other students. It made her stomach turn, but she refused to cry in front of them. Her pride and sense of self-worth were her shields, even if they felt fragile at that moment. Some students noticed the incident and felt a mix of guilt and fear. They had seen what happened but hadn't intervened. They whispered to each other, debating whether to tell a teacher, but fear of retaliation held them back. It created a strange atmosphere in the school, a mix of tension, guilt, and unspoken concern. The girl in the wheelchair sensed it. She could feel eyes watching, not in judgment but in uncertainty. People wanted to do something but didn't know how. By mid-morning, the black girl made small movements toward forming a plan. She thought about how she could confront the bullies, not recklessly, but in a way that would make them stop. She considered speaking up, gathering witnesses, or even creating a situation where the bullies would be exposed for their cruelty. The wheels in her mind turned rapidly, fueled by the injustice she had seen. Lunchtime arrived, and the cafeteria was loud, crowded, and full of energy. The girl in the wheelchair found her usual spot and maneuvered carefully to avoid bumping into anyone. Her friend joined her, placing a hand gently on the table to show solidarity. They tried to focus on their food and conversation, sharing stories from earlier classes and jokes to distract themselves, but the tension of the morning lingered, and every time the girl looked up, she saw the bullies laughing together at another table. The black girl sat across the room, observing quietly. She noticed the subtle ways the bullies tried to assert dominance, small pushes, pointed looks, and mocking gestures. She could see how the girl in the wheelchair tried to ignore it, but the weight of it was visible in her posture and expression. Something had to be done soon. The longer the day went on without action, the more emboldened the bullies would feel. After lunch, as students returned to their classes, the hallways buzzed with movement. The girl in the wheelchair moved carefully, her friend walking alongside her. She felt anxious but determined not to let fear dictate her day. She was aware of her surroundings, noting the bullies' positions and behavior. Each step was measured, each turn calculated. She wanted to reach her next class without incident, but she knew that the bullies might still try something. The black girl followed at a distance, careful to remain unseen. She watched the bullies, observing their patterns and interactions. She noted the times when teachers were distracted or absent, the moments when students clustered around and could act as witnesses. She began to imagine the right moment to intervene, a moment that would be both safe and impactful. She felt the weight of responsibility, knowing that timing and strategy mattered. In the classroom, the girl in the wheelchair tried to engage with the lessons. She asked questions, participated when possible, and focused on her work. Yet the incident from the morning still hovered over her. She replayed the scene in her mind, imagining how she could have responded differently, wishing someone had been there to support her. The emotional bruising was as real as the physical marks on her hands and arms. Throughout the day, the whispers and stares of other students reminded her that the event was not forgotten. Some students avoided eye contact, embarrassed by the behavior of their peers. Others watched from afar, unsure how to respond or whether they should step in. The black girl noticed these reactions and understood that courage could be contagious. If she acted, it might inspire others to stand up as well. By mid-afternoon, a plan had begun to take shape in the black girl's mind. She considered how she could protect the girl in the wheelchair while confronting the bullies. She thought about using the presence of witnesses, drawing attention to the wrongdoing, and ensuring that school authorities would be aware. She weighed every detail carefully, understanding that the right approach could make a difference and that impulsive actions might backfire. The girl in the wheelchair, meanwhile, felt a mixture of anxiety and hope. She didn't know the black girl was observing or planning. All she knew was that the morning had shaken her, that the laughter and pushing had left her feeling small and exposed. She focused on holding her head high, maintaining her dignity, and finding small moments of peace in the chaos around her. She moved from class to class, each transition a test of her endurance, both physically and emotionally. As the final classes approached, the tension in the school seemed to thicken. The bullies continued their usual antics, though now with subtle signs of caution. Something in the atmosphere had shifted, even if they didn't yet realize it. The black girl moved carefully, positioning herself where she could act if necessary, while remaining close enough to support without drawing attention. She was patient, knowing that the right moment would present itself. By the end of the day, both girls carried the weight of the morning incident, but in different ways. The girl in the wheelchair carried it in her body and pride, feeling the lingering pain and humiliation. The black girl carried it in her mind, focused and determined, planning her next move. The day had been long and challenging, but it had also planted the seeds of courage and justice. The moment for action was approaching, though neither girl yet knew exactly how the next 30 minutes would unfold. The hallways, classrooms, and cafeteria had all become stages for something larger than a single fall. Something had shifted, and change was on the horizon. As the day went on, the black girl's mind raced with plans. She replayed the morning's incident over and over, analyzing every detail. The bullies' movements, the timing, the reactions of the other students. She wanted to act, but she knew it had to be precise. She could not let anger take over completely, or the consequences could hurt both herself and the girl in the wheelchair. Patience was key. Timing was everything. During the next class, she kept her eyes subtly on the bullies, noting how they interacted with each other and with the other students. She observed the hierarchy within their group, the way one boy led the others, how each reacted to jokes and gestures, and the small power plays they performed to maintain dominance. She realized that if she confronted them at the wrong moment, they might just laugh at her too, or find a way to turn it against her. Meanwhile, the girl in the wheelchair tried to push the memories of the fall aside, though they lingered in her mind. Each push of her wheels reminded her of the force that had knocked her over. She tried to focus on her classes, on the teacher's voice, on the notes she was taking. But there was an ache inside her, a combination of physical pain and humiliation that refused to fade. She looked around at her classmates, noticing the subtle glances, some filled with concern, others with curiosity, and still others avoiding her entirely. She felt a mixture of loneliness and resilience, knowing she had to continue despite what had happened. By mid-morning, the black girl had begun to develop a strategy. She would need witnesses, she realized. If she confronted the bullies without anyone watching, it could become her word against theirs. But if she created a situation where students could see the injustice, the bullies would lose their sense of invincibility. She considered various scenarios: speaking up during a crowded hallway, using a moment when teachers were nearby, or finding a way to alert someone without causing more harm. Her mind also turned to the girl in the wheelchair. She thought about how vulnerable she must feel, the fear that lingered from being knocked over. She knew that the girl could not defend herself against this type of cruelty. That realization strengthened her resolve. She wanted to make sure that the girl felt supported, that she knew someone cared enough to stand up for her. But she also wanted to ensure the bullies understood that their actions had consequences. During passing periods, the black girl continued to observe. She noticed the patterns. The bullies often laughed and gestured at students who seemed weaker or less likely to respond. She saw how their confidence grew when no one intervened. She made mental notes about when the hallways were busiest, when teachers were most distracted, and when the students were isolated enough to be vulnerable but still in sight of others. Every detail mattered. Every second counted. At one point, she passed near the girl in the wheelchair and offered a quiet nod, a silent acknowledgement that she was not alone. The gesture was brief, almost invisible to others, but it gave the girl a small spark of reassurance. She felt seen in a way she hadn't that morning. It wasn't a solution yet, but it was a reminder that someone cared, and that alone offered a glimmer of strength. Lunchtime came and the cafeteria was noisy and chaotic. The black girl sat in a spot where she could observe the bullies without drawing attention. She noticed their habits, how they interacted, how they made jokes at others' expense, how they sought attention from the surrounding students. She felt a surge of determination. If she acted, it had to be at the right moment when it could have maximum effect. The wrong moment might backfire, and she could not allow that. The girl in the wheelchair maneuvered to her usual spot, accompanied by her friend. She tried to engage in conversation, but her mind kept drifting back to the morning. Every laugh, every snicker from the bullies felt like a fresh sting. She wanted justice, but she also felt uncertain, unsure if it was possible. The weight of vulnerability pressed on her, making her hands grip the wheels a little tighter than necessary. The black girl noticed this. She saw the tension in the girl's body, the slight slump in her shoulders, the way she avoided looking directly at the bullies. She realized that the situation required more than a simple act of confrontation. It required courage, strategy, and timing. She began thinking through possible scenarios, imagining how the bullies might react and how she could ensure that they could not retaliate without witnesses seeing. As the afternoon approached, the black girl moved subtly closer to the hallways where the bullies were likely to be. She stayed behind a few students, keeping out of sight while observing every movement. She noted that the bullies often walked together in a tight formation, joking loudly to attract attention, and that they often chose targets who appeared weak or distracted. She mentally mapped out the routes and the areas where they were most likely to strike next. At the same time, the girl in the wheelchair continued to navigate the school cautiously. Every corner, every hallway required her attention. She had to remain aware of her surroundings, not just for her own safety but to avoid further embarrassment. The memory of the fall still lingered, a dull ache running through her side, but her pride kept her moving forward. She could not let them see that she was afraid, not after everything she had endured. The black girl's thoughts also turned to her own sense of morality. She understood the risks, but she also knew that standing by silently would only allow the bullying to continue. She thought about how she could act decisively, protect the girl in the wheelchair, and ensure that the bully's behavior would be called out. The more she thought about it, the more the plan took shape. It had to be subtle, precise, and effective. She could not rely solely on anger. She had to rely on observation, timing, and courage. During the last classes, the black girl kept her eyes on the bullies, noting how their confidence had grown over the day. The girl in the wheelchair, meanwhile, tried to finish her assignments, her focus strained by the lingering anxiety. Her friend sat nearby offering quiet support, and she clung to that small sense of security. The two girls had not spoken much about the morning incident, but the silent understanding between them provided a fragile comfort. As the final bell approached, signaling the end of classes, both girls prepared for the next part of their day. The black girl had observed enough to feel ready for action, her plan forming in her mind with increasing clarity. She knew when and where she could intervene, and she mentally rehearsed the steps she would take. The girl in the wheelchair was unaware of the plan, but she felt the tension building in the hallways and the anticipation in the air. By the time students began to move toward the exit, the atmosphere had shifted. The bullies were still confident, but there was an undercurrent of uncertainty, a subtle tension they did not yet recognize. The black girl positioned herself strategically, staying near enough to act if needed but keeping a low profile. She could see the girl in the wheelchair navigating the hallway, careful but resolute. Every movement mattered. Every second counted. The final minutes before leaving school were thick with anticipation. The black girl's mind was sharp and focused. The girl in the wheelchair was alert and cautious, and the bullies were unaware of the impending confrontation. It was a moment waiting to happen, a pivot point where courage and strategy would intersect. Both girls, in their own ways, were ready for what was to come, though neither knew exactly how the next half hour would unfold. The stage was set and the tension was palpable, making each step through the crowded hallways feel heavy with possibility and consequence. 30 minutes had passed since the morning incident, and the tension in the hallways had only grown. Students moved with a mix of nervousness and curiosity, sensing that something was about to happen. The girl in the wheelchair navigated carefully, her hands gripping the wheels tightly, her eyes flicking toward the group of bullies who had caused her so much trouble earlier. Each laugh, each subtle gesture from them reminded her of the fall, the humiliation and the frustration that still simmered inside her. The black girl, following discreetly from a short distance, had positioned herself where she could act if needed. Her eyes never left the bullies as she assessed the situation, calculating how to approach without making it dangerous for herself or the girl in the wheelchair. Her mind raced, considering every possibility, weighing every option. She knew she had to act soon. Every second that passed allowed the bullies to grow bolder, and she would not let that happen. The bell had rung, signaling the start of the next class, but the hallways were still busy with students transitioning. The bullies moved confidently, laughing and joking as they walked, unaware of the scrutiny they were under. Their attention was divided, focused on each other and the small group of students nearby, not realizing the black girl had been quietly observing them all along. She noted their movements, anticipating the moment when she could step in and make them accountable for their actions. The girl in the wheelchair felt the unease growing inside her. She could sense something was about to happen but couldn't pinpoint what. She focused on moving forward, avoiding sudden jerks or bumps while also feeling the weight of every gaze from her classmates. Some stared with curiosity, others with sympathy, and a few with guilt for not intervening earlier. The mix of emotions in the hallway made it feel heavy, almost suffocating. Finally, the moment came. One of the bullies, noticing a younger student passing by, decided to make a joke at their expense. He pushed lightly against the boy's shoulder, laughing loudly as the student stumbled. The black girl saw her opportunity. She stepped forward decisively, her voice clear and strong, cutting through the noise of the crowded hallway. "Stop it," she called, her tone firm and unwavering. The sound drew attention immediately, and several students turned to see what was happening. The bullies froze, startled by the sudden interruption. They had not expected anyone to confront them directly, especially not someone who seemed so calm and composed. Their laughter faltered, replaced by uneasy glances toward the surrounding students. The black girl took a step closer, her posture confident, her eyes locked on the group. She wasn't threatening physically, but her presence carried authority. "You think it's funny to push people around to humiliate them?" she asked, her voice carrying across the hallway. Her words were simple but powerful, cutting through the bravado that the bullies had relied on all day. The students around began to notice, whispering among themselves, some nodding in agreement, others watching intently, unsure of what would happen next. The girl in the wheelchair, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, stopped and watched. Her heart raced, unsure if this confrontation would go well or make things worse. She felt a mix of fear and hope. Fear of retaliation, hope that someone was finally standing up for what was right. She watched as the black girl spoke with calm determination, her voice unwavering despite the potential danger. One of the bullies, regaining some composure, tried to laugh it off. "What are you going to do about it?" he said, a hint of mockery in his tone. The black girl didn't flinch. She looked directly at him, her eyes steady. "I'm going to make sure you stop. You can't treat people this way and you won't get away with it anymore," she said firmly. The words carried weight, not just because of her courage, but because the surrounding students were now watching. Witnesses were present, and the bullies realized that their usual tactics would no longer work. The tension in the hallway grew. Some students stepped closer, subtly offering support, while others remained at a distance, unsure how to react. The black girl continued, pointing out the behavior for everyone to see. "You pushed someone in a wheelchair earlier today. That's not a joke. That's not funny. And everyone here saw it." Her tone left no room for argument, no space for denial. The witnesses' eyes shifted toward the bullies, silently affirming the truth of her words. The bullies exchanged nervous glances, their confidence faltering. They had counted on fear and silence to maintain control, but now the spotlight was on them. The laughter that had accompanied their actions disappeared, replaced by uncertainty and a growing sense of accountability. They muttered excuses, tried to shrug it off, but their words lacked conviction. The presence of witnesses had changed everything. The girl in the wheelchair felt a surge of relief. She saw someone standing up for her, someone willing to speak the truth when she couldn't. Her hands relaxed slightly on the wheels, her body shifting with a sense of renewed strength. The black girl had acted not just for herself but for her, and the gesture carried a weight that words alone could not describe. The courage displayed before her made her feel less alone, less powerless, and more capable of facing the challenges ahead. A teacher, drawn by the noise and the attention, arrived at the scene. She quickly assessed the situation, noticing the group of bullies and the black girl standing firmly. The surrounding students provided quiet support, and the teacher stepped in, asking for an explanation. The black girl calmly recounted the morning incident, pointing out what had happened and emphasizing the importance of stopping this behavior. The witnesses confirmed her account, making it clear that the bullying could not be ignored. The teacher's presence added authority to the situation. The bullies realized that this confrontation was no longer just about words. They would face consequences. Their attempts to dismiss the situation faltered as the teacher took control, ensuring that the behavior would be addressed appropriately. The black girl stepped back slightly, allowing the authority figure to handle the formal consequences, while still maintaining a watchful eye on the bullies. The hallway slowly returned to a sense of order, but the impact of the confrontation remained. Students whispered among themselves, discussing the courage displayed and the shift in dynamics. The girl in the wheelchair felt a mixture of emotions: gratitude, relief, and a sense of empowerment. She had witnessed firsthand that standing up for what is right could make a difference, and she felt inspired by the black girl's actions. The bullies, now subdued, were escorted to the office for further discussion with the administration. Their usual dominance had been challenged, their confidence shaken. The lesson was clear: cruelty and intimidation would not go unnoticed, and standing up to injustice could change the balance of power. The surrounding students absorbed this lesson, their awareness heightened by the courage displayed in the hallway. As the girl in the wheelchair continued to her next class, she felt a sense of support she had not felt earlier in the day. The black girl had intervened not with violence but with courage and strategy, and the impact was immediate. She felt a renewed sense of confidence, knowing that she was not alone and that others were willing to stand up for what was right. The experience left her with a stronger sense of self and a belief in the power of solidarity. The black girl, watching the situation unfold, felt a sense of satisfaction and relief. She had taken a risk, but the outcome justified her actions. She had not only defended someone in need, but had also challenged a group of students who relied on fear and intimidation. The moral victory was clear, and the impact would be felt throughout the school. Her actions had inspired courage and shown that standing up for others could change the course of events. As the school day continued, the students processed what had happened. The girl in the wheelchair received quiet nods of approval and small gestures of support from classmates she had not expected. The atmosphere in the school had shifted subtly, a sense of accountability now present in the hallways. The bullies, humbled by the confrontation and the presence of witnesses, were forced to reconsider their actions and the way they treated others. By the end of the day, the hallways were quieter, filled with students moving between classes with a new awareness. The girl in the wheelchair felt a sense of closure for the morning incident, knowing that someone had intervened and that the bullies would face consequences. The black girl's courage had created a ripple effect, changing the dynamics of the school and offering hope to those who had previously felt powerless. The two girls exchanged a brief look, a silent acknowledgement of what had just occurred. No words were necessary. The understanding was clear. One had acted with courage, and the other had witnessed and experienced the power of that action. The moment marked a turning point in their day, in their school, and in their lives. The lesson was simple but profound. Standing up for what is right, even in the face of fear, could create real change and inspire others to do the same. By the end of the school day, the atmosphere in the hallways had changed completely. Students moved with a quieter awareness, their conversations hushed but filled with reflection. The girl in the wheelchair felt a sense of relief she had not experienced since the morning. The bullying that had cast a shadow over her day was no longer unchecked, and she could finally feel the weight on her shoulders lifting. She moved through the hallways carefully, gripping the wheels of her chair with a sense of confidence that had been missing earlier. Her friend walked beside her, offering quiet support and sharing small smiles that carried reassurance. They didn't need to talk much. The events of the day had spoken volumes. The girl in the wheelchair thought about the black girl who had intervened and felt gratitude beyond words. Someone had seen the injustice, had acted without hesitation, and had made a real difference. That act of courage had given her a renewed sense of hope and a belief in the possibility of fairness. Meanwhile, the black girl observed the school with a quiet satisfaction. She had taken a risk by confronting the bullies, but the outcome had been exactly what she had hoped for. The bullies had been challenged and held accountable, their confidence shaken. More importantly, she had shown that standing up for others was possible, and that courage could inspire change. She felt proud, not for herself, but for the impact her actions had on the girl in the wheelchair and on the other students who had witnessed it. The school administration had taken the matter seriously. Reports were filed, and the bullies were called in for discussions with teachers and counselors. The focus was not solely on punishment, but on understanding the harm caused and ensuring that such behavior would not continue. Students who had witnessed the events shared their accounts, supporting the narrative that had been observed. The process reinforced the lesson that actions had consequences and that the school community was responsible for protecting all its members. The girl in the wheelchair felt a sense of closure. She had experienced humiliation and pain, but she had also seen justice enacted in a calm and fair way. The black girl's intervention had not only stopped the immediate threat, but had set a precedent for future behavior. It was a lesson she would carry with her, a reminder that even in moments of vulnerability, courage and solidarity could change the outcome. In the days following the incident, the school environment shifted subtly but noticeably. The hallways that had once felt tense and uncertain became spaces where students were more aware of their actions. Bullying incidents decreased as the confidence of those who had relied on fear and intimidation had been challenged. Students began to offer small gestures of support to one another, helping classmates in subtle but meaningful ways. The girl in the wheelchair noticed these changes, feeling a sense of community she had not expected. Her friendship with the black girl deepened. Though they had not spoken much during the initial incident, the shared experience created a bond. They began to talk more, sharing stories and supporting each other in different ways. The girl in the wheelchair felt understood and validated, while the black girl felt a sense of fulfillment in having made a positive difference. Their relationship became a quiet source of strength for both of them, a reminder that courage and kindness could create lasting connections. Other students took note as well. The act of standing up against bullying inspired some to consider how they might act in similar situations. The courage displayed by the black girl became a quiet example, a lesson in morality and bravery. Students who had previously remained silent felt empowered to speak up, realizing that they too could make a difference. The ripple effect of one brave act had spread beyond the immediate incident, influencing the broader school community. The girl in the wheelchair reflected on her own resilience. She had faced humiliation and physical harm, but she had endured. She realized that while the support of others was crucial, her own strength had been an essential part of her ability to navigate the day. She had remained composed, had not given in to fear, and had continued to move forward despite the challenges. This self-awareness gave her a sense of empowerment that complemented the external support she had received. The black girl, in turn, continued to think about the importance of standing up for others. She recognized that courage was not about recklessness or aggression. It was about timing, strategy, and the willingness to act when it mattered most. She had learned that one voice could make a significant difference, especially when backed by observation, planning, and the moral conviction to do what was right. The experience reinforced her belief in the power of individual action to create meaningful change. Together, the two girls began to foster a sense of mutual respect and understanding. They shared moments of laughter, study, and conversation, building a friendship that had been forged in the fire of adversity. Their bond became a quiet symbol to others that solidarity and courage were valuable traits, and that standing up for what was right could strengthen relationships and communities.